Surekha Dey, thank you so much for joining us at the Storytelling by and for Adult session today on Monday, August 1st, 2022. Please tell us where you're telling from, tell us about your work, and please tell us a story.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Eric, and nice to have so many of you from so many parts of the world listen to stories together. And as a background, I always loved stories. I'm sure all of us do. But I was very lucky about 20 years ago when I was living in Singapore. We were the first group of storytellers actually trained by the National Library Board. And I was one of the founder members of the Asian Storytelling Network, long time ago. And what I've been doing is I've been telling stories to children, to adults, and I'm also an educator now. I teach people, adults, mostly teachers, how to tell stories and how to link it to the brain, because it's very important that the teachers understand that aspect of storytelling. And I'm really excited. Recently, I started working with very small babies from 0 to 3. And when I started developing that aspect of storytelling, it was fascinating to know that babies actually start listening in the final trimester of the pregnancy of the mother. Already they're listening to stories. So that's what I do. And the story that I have for you today is called The Fisherman. It's a folktale from Armenia. And when I heard the story, I was really, it's one of those stories that just grabbed me. And I'm really happy to share it with all of you. Some of you might have heard the story, but otherwise, let me tell it to you. Story, story, story. A king was walking along the shores of a lake. He looked out into the lake and he saw an old man with long gray hair and a long white beard, with his loincloth, his lungi, casting a net, drawing it in, throwing away the fish, casting his net, drawing it in, and throwing away the fish. That man is not fishing, said the king. Advisor, I want you to get him to speak to me. So the advisor stepped out and he called, hey, you fisherman, you over there. Yes, you. The king would like to speak to you. So the fisherman folded his net, put it in his boat, and he rowed back to the shore. And he went towards the king. He bowed and he said, Your Majesty, I'm here for you to command. You were not fishing. What were you doing out there? That's a long story, Your Majesty. If you have the ear to hear, I'd like to tell you the story. I love stories, said the king. Sit down. So the old man sat down, the king sat down, and the advisor sat down. Your Majesty, when I was young and strong and vibrant, I used to come to this very lake to fish. I would throw my net and then pull in my fish, and I would take the haul to the marketplace to sell. And in the evenings, I would go back home with some fish for my mother, who would cook it for our evening meal. And as we ate the meal, my mother would start berating me. Am I going to ever see my grandchildren before I die? Won't you think of getting married? Your Majesty, I was not ready to settle down. I was happy playing backgammon with my friends in the alleys of the marketplace, drinking sweet hot coffee, sipping pomegranate wine, and watching the girls and the ladies walk into the marketplace. I never wanted to settle down. Till one day, when I was out fishing, I cast my net And I felt what I had got was the biggest catch of my life. I pulled and took it into the boat, but it was not a fish. It was a big wooden box. And around the box was a golden chain. And on the chain, a golden key. I took the key and put it into the lock. Click. The box opened. Opened the lid. And inside, Your Majesty, was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. She took my breath away. I was hers forever and ever. She smiled and she looked at me and she said, hello. Your Majesty, her smile was bedazzling. Her hair as black as the midnight sky, and her face pale as the full moon. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Hello, she said again. And I said, hello, who are you? I am your wife, if you'll have me. Your Majesty, I didn't have to think twice. I put out my hand and I helped her and made her sit next to me in the boat. And I rowed all the way back to the shore. And with her in one hand and the box in the other, I walked back home. And as I reached the doorway of my home, my mother, she came out and she looked at her and she said, is this her? Is this the one who's going to make me a grandmother? Is this the one that you are going to marry? And I said, yes, she is the one. My mother was so excited. She ran out to the market square and she invited everybody for my wedding. After the wedding, I thought to myself, my wife is so beautiful. Me being a fisherman doesn't do her justice. I have to learn another skill. And so, Your Majesty, I decided to learn the skills to become a goldsmith. And I realized I was very good at it. And soon I had commission from the great and the rich and the regal. And soon I had a workshop of my own. And every stone that I set, every earring that I made, every ring, every bangle, every necklace, or every anklet I made it in her honor. And when I came back home in the evenings from my workshop, and I went into my home, there would be singing and laughter. Sometimes my mother would be weaving, my wife would be cooking, or they would be singing together. This, Your Majesty, was truly happiness. Home is where the heart is, and I was such a lucky man. But one day, when I was in my workshop working on a very difficult piece of jewelry, there was an aroma which wafted into the room from under the door, a perfume, something that I had never smelt before. And as I looked up, the door burst open and there stood there 3 veiled women. They walked in as one and they spoke in one voice. Goldsmith, are you happy? What sort of a question is that? Who are you? Of course I'm happy. Why are you here? Why are you asking me this question? They laughed. If you're happy, they turned around and walked out of the door and closed it behind them, leaving behind the aroma, the strong fragrance, something that I had never smelt before. And the thought, the question in my brain, drilling into my brain, was I happy? I couldn't work anymore. I put away my tools, I closed my workshop and I hurried home. And when I went home, my mother and my wife, they were singing, dinner was on the table. It was so beautiful. She stood there, this lovely wife of mine, and I said, I am happy. And so it almost as if I had to show this to myself. I took her by the hand and led her to my bedroom to show myself and to convince myself I was truly, truly happy. The next day, when I went back to the workshop, my mind was still in a confusion and I knew that they would come back. Sure enough, the aroma wafted from under the door into the room, the smell, that heady perfume, and the door burst open again and there stood the three women, the three veiled women, and they had the same question. Goldsmith, are you happy? This time I was really frustrated. Why are they doing this to me? I'm a happy man. I said, I'm happy, my wife is happy, my mother is happy. If you're happy, they turned around and left the room, closing the door after them, leaving behind in their wake the aroma, the perfume, and the thought in my brain, piercing into my brain, almost hurting me. This time, I just closed the shop. I didn't even put away my tools. I walked in the market square that I knew so well. I walked till the sun went down. I walked and walked and walked till I knew I had to go home. My mother was at the door with a look that only mothers have when they're displeased with their sons. Why are you late? She's upstairs in the room crying. You've missed supper today. I'm sorry. And I went up to my bedroom. She was there, my beautiful wife, sobbing softly, but I could not bear look at her. I slept on the other side of the bed. I lay down there. I knew that I should have touched her. I should have comforted her, but I could not do it. I tried to sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, all I saw was the three veiled women. At the first crow of the dawn, I was up. I washed my face with cold water, changed my clothes, and I ran back to my workshop. I had to see them again, and I knew that they would come, and they did. The aroma wafted in from under the door, the perfume, and there they stood, the three women. Goldsmith, are you happy? No, I'm not happy. You have to show me what is happiness. Follow me, they said in one voice, and I followed them through the roads in the market that I knew so well, till we came across roads that I'd never seen before. I walked and walked and walked, following them, till we came to a big oak door, and on it was a knocker fashioned like a woman with a veil. One of the ladies put in a lock, put in a key, and opened the door. And I followed them in a beautiful courtyard flooded with light, and a table in the middle laden with the most delicious food. One of the women went to get water to wash my face, my hands, and my feet. The other brought me pomegranate wine, and the third a platter full of food, and they fed me. One of them picked up the oud and started to play music. And the other two, they started to dance and dance and dance to the music, till at last the music, when it was over, they stopped dancing and dropped their veils. Your Majesty, I told you that my wife was beautiful, but these three women, I have no words to tell you how beautiful they were. And in one voice, they asked me, choose. Which one should I choose? They're equally beautiful. And as if to tell me which one of the ladies put her foot a little forward. That one, I want that one. The three women covered their face again, and they said, if you choose, you have to go and take your wife, put her back into the box, and take her and drop her in the middle of the lake where you found her. I didn't even hesitate. I ran down through the door, through these roads that I had never seen before, till I came to the ones that I knew, like the back of my hand. I ran all the way to my home. Where is she? I asked my mother. What's wrong? Why do you want to, what has happened? She's on the roof. Why do you want to see her? Have she done something? Has something gone wrong? Ask me no questions. I ran up to the roof 3 steps at a time. She was there, my beautiful wife, pressing olives. Follow me, I said. What's wrong? Is something wrong? Follow me and ask no questions. She followed me and I took her to the bedroom. The box was still there. We had made it into a table. I pushed all the things that were on it and I told her, come along with me. I held her hand in one and the other, I held the box. And thump, 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 I took it down the stairs. My mother was still at the doorway. Where are you taking my daughter-in-law? What is wrong? Tell me. She was sobbing, but I did not have anything to say. I said, do not ask me any questions. And I took my wife and the box to the shore of the lake where I found my old boat. I told her to get in. She said, please, please don't do this, husband. Is it because I haven't given you a child? Please wait, I'm sure it will all happen. It has nothing to do with all that. Get into the box. She seemed resigned to her fate and she went in. I closed the box. I took the golden key, put the golden string around it, and I locked the box, put it back into the box, into the boat, and I rowed to the center of the lake and I pushed it in. And I felt as if all my responsibilities had left me, all my happiness had left me. And then I rowed back to the shore and I ran back through the village square, to the marketplaces, to the roads that I knew. And I started to look for this door, the door with the oak door with the knocker, fashioned like a woman, with veiled woman. I could find nothing. I asked everybody in the market and nobody knew anything. I ran and looked, but there was nothing. I couldn't find it. There was only one place that I could go to and it was back home. My mother was still there standing at the doorstep. What is wrong? Tell me, where is my daughter-in-law? Tears were streaming down my eyes. I told her the whole story. She said, what have you done, you fool? What have you done? But wait, all is not lost. Go back to the lake. Throw your net, maybe you will get her back again. And so I went back to the lake and every day I threw the net, pulled it in, but there was no box, only fish. Only fish that I threw away. I threw the net, pulled it in, and threw away the fish. There was nothing. That was on the first day, but I went back the next day and the next day and the next day. Till you saw me today, Your Majesty. I have work to do and I need to go. You have heard my story. And so the fisherman went away from the king, back to his boat, and went back into the river, into the lake, where he threw his net and drew it in and threw away the fish. Cast his net and threw away the fish. Cast his net, reined it in and threw away the fish. Cast his net, reined it in and threw away the fish. Story. That's the end of my story.
Well, thank you. It was very beautifully told, but it's such a tragic story.
But there's still hope. He might get up.
He might find the box again. He might find her again.
Well, I think the sad part of it is the women, I think, no more than him.
Which women?
The wife, not
Yes,
the.
of course. But she's not, and she's not an ordinary, is she even human? I mean, she's sort of a spirit
That's true.
from the
Well.
lake, right? I mean, she came from the lake, she came from underwater. She's not a regular human being. But she suffered, right? She was very unhappy.
Yeah.
So you told that story as a narrator, but then the long middle section, you told it, the fisherman told his story to the king.
Yeah.
So there the fisherman was telling his story. But how can you tell that story? Aren't you furious with the fisherman? Aren't you so angry with him that you wouldn't even tell his story?
I think it's a bit like Ekalavya's story. You know, like all these stories have so many messages that you learn from it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought as a story, it was a very powerful story, the way that it was, you know, the way it progresses, the plot of the story is very interesting. So I looked at it that way. And
But morally, aren't you you know, upset about the man's behavior?
yeah. Yes. It's all about greed and it's all about passion, but it's also at the same time a little bit about hope at the end that he may find his wife. He is sorry for what he did. And
Well, you know, just as his wife is not an ordinary human, I believe that the three women who had the veils, they also were not, they may not have been human at all, because they disappeared, right?
yeah, they might have come to teach him a lesson,
To test him.
to test him or teach him a lesson.
Well,
you know.
he I don't know what lesson if they tested him, he failed the test. I think I'm more judgmental than you are.
Well, I just like take stories for, you know, the power that it has sometimes when you tell it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you really enjoy telling that story because the message is so strong and you want to share it with lots of people. So this is one of those stories I really like that.
Anybody, any thoughts, Gustavo?
Yes, I love that story, but it meant, let's say what we don't know what we have in the sometimes, and sometimes we have to appreciate what they had. And this story made me remember a very beautiful story that's called the Seven Leavenings, Las Siete Levaduras. It's on the Angela Carter's book about a woman who goes on. She's working on bread, and she goes on a trip, and then the fact that she finds two women that in Baghdad that are childless, and she tricks the man, she tricks the situation in order to the woman to be accepted and the child to be accepted in the two facts. It's a very beautiful story. I like it, and it's funny. In a sense, it's funny. It takes into account this thing about, I think it's about a raven or Islamic challenge of women being childless, right? I think it's like
Yes.
a problem, but it solves it in a funny way. Let's say in a funny way, because the woman tricks the man, and I like it. And I like that story. It was very beautiful, and it's with hope. At least he has hope. He acknowledged what he had lost. That's true.
Surekha, I was intrigued with your sentence that you help link the story to the brain. Can you say anything more about that? I mean, with the story that we heard, how would you help us link that to our brains?
I'm talking about, you know, stories in general. When you tell a story and you have a listener. You are all listeners. I'm the storyteller.
Mm.
But if the story comes out right, what happens is the listener and the storyteller start to mirror each other. So that the listener is living through the story through the teller. And at that time, the neurons, are there's a lot of chemical reactions that happen in the brain. So everything from certain types of chemicals, like I won't give you all the chemical names, but basically it helps you to calm down. It helps with memory. It helps with many things. And oxytocin, just to give you a few, it's like all these chemicals which are released. That's what I was talking about. So, it works wonders. That's why when you tell a story, people tend to calm down. And when I was working even with, children who are in spectrum, there are certain types of stories that work very well with them, which is like sensory stories and things like that, where you are actually, because they have a problem with senses. So, the brain is taking in the story in a very different way. A lot of parts, the brain has a lot of, parts to it. They all light up. And now with fMRIs and all that, they're actually able to see it. And more, they are proving that when you tell a story, it's remembered much more than if you read a book to a child. A story that's why I think it's something that is, humankind has evolved through storytelling. We have learned everything through the stories that our ancestors told us. It was survival. So that's how the brain is connected. So with the stories.
Yes, and I believe that whenever we hear or read or see a story, we automatically imagine ourselves as the characters and as the scenery. We project ourselves into it. So
because multisensory, it's a multisensory tool.
Yeah, multisensory, but we imagine it's happening to us.
Yeah.
So we're always thinking, oh, that's what happened. That's what the character does. Would I do it? Would I do that, or would I do it a different way? But we're constantly having this discussion as we're observing. We're comparing it to ourselves, and we're seeing if it fits the way we would behave.
I think, this story, you got really upset with the character in the story, Eric, because you really lived through that story just now. And that's what happened. When it's a good story and it's told well, this is what happens. I mean, it's.
Well, I got into the man, but also his mother and his wife.
Yeah.
We identify with all the characters of a story.
Yeah. And the king, or, everybody.
What role did the king really have in that story? Actually,
he's almost like his conscience. He made him, bring out what he was holding inside, bottling up inside. So through his story, because he had no friends, he had no family. His mother was probably gone by then, He's an old man. So he was cleansing himself of his guilt.
Who was
the old man? When the king asked him to tell the story, he says, I'm very interested in stories. He kind of brought out all the things that he had bottled inside.
The fisherman.
Yeah, the fisherman.
Yeah. No. I was asking about what role the king played, and you said that he was a listener. He was a conscience,
a trigger,
a conscience, a listener. To mirror back to the fisherman what the fisherman was saying. Okay, wonderful. Anybody else want to add anything? All right, thank you so much, Surekha. Go ahead, Hannah.
I just want to say that it was really mesmerizing. Somebody else had also put down, Surekha. Such a beautiful way to narrate the story. You basically drew us in, and we were actually drawing the net in and throwing the fish out, when you ended the story. And I was hoping that, there would be something else, but we knew where it was going. And so the whole story was set in flashback. So, which is, I think, in itself, a way to draw people in. And also, I think stories are very powerful in that we are no more, somebody, shared this with me about how we've all become Netflix oriented these days, right? We've all sold our souls to Netflix. We no more read. Those of us who were voracious readers at one point have just given up reading. So the essential difference between being a consumer of content that's videoed to a content like this, like through storytelling or to reading, is that the empathy that one feels and that the tendency to become the character in the story, So whereas with Netflix, we're more of voyeurs, right? We're just watching someone else's imagination. But in stories, we become that person. So that way, I really loved the way you narrated the story. And I think it's a beautiful story. One of loss and what does one do with loss, and a loss that has happened because of one's own foolishness, and how does one deal with that foolishness and the loss, and to grieve and do something to deal with that grief. It was a beautiful story. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Surekha.